All right, welcome to episode 10 of John's Voice. We're going to jump into it this time. I'm going to talk about atheism. And I think it's important to talk about atheism and understanding it and the reason why it is there. And I think if anyone is honest, if there's any Christian who is honest, you do find yourself going back and forth between this thought of, is there really a God? Am I foolish for believing in this? Why does it seem like God doesn't listen to me sometimes? Is there really a God listening? Like, that is absolutely human nature. There's nothing wrong with admitting that. Because we tend to rely specifically on what we can see and very little on what we don't see. If we've learned anything, though, especially under this environment with COVID-19, the unseen is more dangerous to us than what is seen. I mean, we are wearing masks to protect ourselves from an unseen. We are wearing gloves. We're washing our hands, all to protect us from that which is unseen. And it's not until that we are impacted by this unseen that there are symptoms that you can see. So it made me think about the symptoms of Christianity and the symptoms of atheism. Both of them have symptoms. And this is observable. So in atheism, there are symptoms that are associated with it. And first off, you have to kind of wrap your brain around this idea that it's the only one of its kind that I know of that describes itself based on being a void of the other. Like, here's what I mean. There's no term for someone who doesn't like football as being a football. There's no term for someone who doesn't like football or someone who doesn't like baseball. Only when it comes to the concept of God do we have this word, atheist, meaning no God, right? We do find it in the plant world of stuff, and even sometimes with some of the things that people like to say nowadays, the term of asexual reproduction. We do find that, trees engaging in asexual reproduction, meaning that there is this lack there, but nothing else. Like, there's nothing else that defined itself by the absence of the other. We either have the word skinny, fat. We don't describe ourselves as a skinny, although I would probably prefer that term to the weight I've put on recently. But in other words, what I mean is that only in the realm of God do we find there is a word to describe an absence of God. So the symptoms, though, is what I think is also key, because I notice that it is also a very symptomatic life as well. And I think if people would be honest about it, we're going to look more at the honesty of atheism as we dig deeper into the show. But let's look at the symptoms. Growing up, when I was a kid, Sunday was just another day. It was just, I don't remember there being any difference in Saturday and Sunday. These were just 2 days that I didn't have to go to school and I didn't have to go to work. The only reverence that ever came for Sunday, it was when I had to stay with a babysitter. And my babysitter, if I can say anything about that woman at all, she was definitely a God-fearing woman. She attended the lovely Mount Harmony Baptist Church and regular attended. I mean, she was there all the time. And for those of you that are familiar with certain Southern Baptists, she goes to church all the time and read her Bible constantly. She listened to gospel music, wouldn't listen to anything else. And if I stayed with her, I had to go to church on Sunday. There was no other choice. Which also created a very difficult time processing the two. Because remember, in an atheistic household, there is no support for this. My mom and dad was just more attributing me staying there so that they could recover from the drinking that they had done the night before. And if I did anything like go to church or what have you, It wasn't something that was discussed. Like, I didn't get home and there'd be a discussion about what did you learn today at Sunday school. There would be something about, well, did you get your fairy tale story in today? And so it wasn't supported. So some of the symptoms, though, that I saw associated with it was vices. My dad, he drank a lot. He smoked a lot. My mom, she drank also. The environment that I grew up in was a very toxic environment. And by that I mean that some of the things that happened to me as a result of that environment is definitely one of the symptoms of atheism. And so one of those symptoms is that there was sexual immorality. I'm not proud of it, but I have to include this so that you can fully understand that I grew up being sexually abused by a brother from the age of 4 until the age of 8. And again, I'm not faulting my parents for this one, and I'll also go as far as to tell you that I don't fault God for that one either. And I know that that's going to be a hard concept, especially for someone who is atheistic, to really get their head around, is how in the world can God allow such bad things in your life? Well, I wish to explain. Because one of the things that you have to contend with in an atheist household is that there is no sense of being accountable for anything greater than yourself. That's a symptom. And you see, because of that symptom, the construct of right and wrong is almost impossible to impart. My dad would tell me that there was 2 things that he just he wouldn't tolerate. He wouldn't tolerate lying, and he wouldn't tolerate stealing. The problem with it is, though, is for what? If there is no God, if there is no other rational and accountable being in whom I have to show some form of loyalty to, if it's just because you said so, we see that type of mentality, it doesn't produce a good result. Leadership is leading by example, not do as I say, not as I do. It won't work, because in the human condition, we are monkey see, monkey do. So that was one of the conditions, is that sexual immorality is part of the fruits, if you will, of atheistic life. Alone. Feelings of constantly being alone. When you're a child in that situation and you are being abused, you're being molested, I get people who ask me, well, didn't you try to tell someone? I did try to tell someone. The problem is that, if you've heard me say on many other shows before, there's a barrier when it comes to language, and there's also a barrier when it comes to our children. If you don't raise your children knowing what their body parts are and the uses of those body parts and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, if that's a taboo subject, as it was growing up in my household, then what that did is that allowed evil the ability to reign supreme. Another symptom of atheism. Evil can reign supreme. Why? Because we don't discuss truth. We don't discuss the truth of our body. We don't discuss truths of anything, because as far as we're concerned, there's nothing. And that's the kind of the overarching theme of atheism. There is nothing after this life. If I die, there's nothing. I believed in the Big Bang Theory. I loved it. I mean, it seemed like it described everything completely. Evolution. I don't even question it. Of course, it is observable that you can see that different animals and different things, when they are subjected to different environments, will evolve according to the environment that they're in. But if there is no God and it is all just chaos, and that's all we're doing, then there's no purpose to any of it. And so therefore it becomes difficult to condemn behavior when you have no system of morality, to base it off of. And so that's what happened. I go and I'm trying to tell, my parents, I'm trying to say, hey, look, my brother is mistreating me. I didn't have any words to be able to articulate what it was that was happening. So the only thing my dad could respond with is, as long as your brother is in charge, you will do what you are told. That sealed my fate. It ensured my silence. How can I talk to, if I can't tell my parents what's happening and I don't even know how to say it to them, how can I say it to anyone else? Now, again, that's a result that's a symptom of an atheist lifestyle. So now, you take an atheist child who's being abused, and at the age of 5 years old, you force him into a Protestant service. And so I'm sitting in this lovely Protestant service, and I'm listening to this preacher preach on how, that we're all destined to hell, that we have to ask Jesus to save us, and that we have to confess our sins, and that all of the problems that we're having in our life is because of our disobedience and not following God. Now, you got a 5-year-old brain who's trying to rectify the situation that he's currently in, and now there's a preacher who's telling me that all of this stuff in my life is because of my disobedience to God, and that if I could just be born again, that if I come forward and I admit that I am a sinner and I have done wrong, that I can be forgiven and I can be saved. Well, that sounds great to my little 5-year-old mind, and I stand up in a church, in a Protestant church, mind you, and I'm going to explain why that's important. I stand up in a Protestant church with tears in my eyes, begging for someone to help me. I just don't have the words, but everything this guy is saying basically says that I'm bad, and that all of the stuff that's happening to me is because of my disobedience. And so I get up crying. I walk down the center of the aisle. I'll never forget this preacher looking at me and telling the whole congregation, "Oh, and blessed be God, a child shall show them the way. Please come on forward, my child." And I go up, and I'm confessing all of these. What sins could a 5-year-old possibly have had? I don't even remember what it was I said. I just remembered thinking, I got to tell them I've been really bad. I don't like my life as it is right now. I wish something would change. I wish Jesus would come in and help me with this. And so I confess all of this, and he touches my head and tells me to be healed in the name of Jesus. And I'm thinking, yay, this is it. I've been saved. I'm being saved. This is what they're telling me. I'm saved. I wish to tell you that the abuse did not stop. It did continue, which further fractured any ability for me to be able to hear anything. I remember having to stand up in front of the church after it happened and the abuse continued. I remembered being forced to stand in front of the church, and I had to sing "Jesus Loves the Little Children." And that song, I don't even know that I can listen to it to this day without getting those feelings of how alone that was. Because number one, it further severed the relationship that I had with God. Now not only did I not have a relationship with God, but I'm angry at a God, and my dad thinks it's foolish for me to even be there in the first place. So you look at that conundrum, that one of the symptoms of an atheist lifestyle is that now, because you've taken that path, you're even stupid for reaching out to this God. What sort of being would make you feel stupid for reaching out to God? That's a question you have to kind of answer for yourself. But so then one of the other symptoms that was associated with it was anger, frustration. I remember one night in my teenage years of driving in my car, And I basically, again, I'm just bearing my soul here because I think sometimes that's what we need. I'm yelling at God, and I'm like, look, if this is the life that you've given me, and if there is some sort of being that is there, then how dare you bring me into this life, subject me to all of this, and leave me to just deal with it? That there's no way you could be a good and just God, as we've been told. And I went further into, oh no, you are not real. And so from that, what starts happening? I find myself living the same immoral lifestyle. The alcohol, the smoking, the not feeling connected to anyone. And I set about just looking at the observable universe, and I would even tell you that there is a certain sort of a healing effect, if that's a word. Because in atheism, the idea is that when you die, there's nothing, that you just go back to nothing, that wherever you were before you were born, you don't remember it, so it was nothing, and that's where you will return, and there's nothing, and so there won't be any pain because there's nothing, and you won't see any of the loved ones again because there's nothing, and so you just become nothing. Well, I also started to realize that then that means the relationships that I have mean nothing as well. That means that I love you has no purpose other than just an immediate effect, right? I love you becomes some sort of an emotional response to the chemical releases in my brain because that's evolved, and I feel this amorous emotion towards this other person, but it doesn't really matter anyway because there's no concept of loving you forever. I love you as long as this impulse is supported. And the moment that something else comes along that supports a different impulse, then I'm just going to go with that because I don't have to be accountable to anyone. Now, I know that may be hard to follow, and I'm going to tell you, it is very difficult to even follow anymore myself. Because what you're really asking someone to believe is that you first, believe it or not, in order to get there, you have to create a God in whom not to believe. And it made it so difficult to manage that because you constantly have to tear down anything. But when I started to look at why is that? Why do I have to tear this down? You know, certain things started to be revealed to me. As I started to look out, and I'm looking at all of these religions, one of the things as an atheist I always used to say is that all of these religions and gods, they're always the same. It's just man seeking to explain something that he doesn't understand. And it seems like all of these gods, all these gods or these religions, they seem to disagree with each other. And so by virtue of that, they must all be wrong. They all have to be wrong because they're not in agreement. God doesn't say the same thing to anybody at any given time. But you see, there was the error of my way. What I come to understand the moment that it all started to become very clear to me. And so I want to share it with you here. You heard me talk earlier about Mamaw, my Mamaw, that's the southern term. My babysitter, we called her, but we called her Mamaw. And the thing about her was that when it comes to facing this judgment of God, and you hear me standing all the time on the Catholic Church as the one true church, well then the question that would reasonably follow, well then do you believe that Mamaw Margie is in heaven? Yes, I do. No, she wasn't Catholic. How's that possible then, John, if you believe that Catholic is the one true church? It all has to do with our understanding. You see, she had never heard anything about the Catholic Church, at least in my knowledge. Mount Harmony Baptist Church was about the only church she ever attended. And the thing that was always evident about her was that she loved Jesus. She loved the teachings of Jesus. And so for her, not having been exposed to the truth or the true church, she lived her life trying to walk with Jesus, not knowing anything else. How could you possibly condemn this woman for what she didn't know. I got that from listening to Jesus say, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." You see, knowing what you do is where it really comes in. Now, I know atheists can contort that one. Well, then, John, then that means that if I think that I'm doing something that's good, then really who's to judge? No, please don't contort it. You see, it's one thing to know the truth and be disobedient to the truth, and it's another thing you genuinely just don't know. So, is it possible for somebody to attend a separate church, live their life according to that, and still find salvation? I believe in a God that can absolutely read the heart of a person and know whether or not that they are coming from wanting to be closer to God. And that is an independent thing. That's why God can judge each one of His people according to their hearts. You see, for my heart, now for me to rebel against the truth, that's what it would be. It would be disobedient. It wouldn't be as innocent as it was for Mamo. Wouldn't be. Or anyone else for that matter. You see, it's what the nature of sin has done. Sin has put this barrier between us and communion with God. And you imagine Satan scattering the word into 45,000 different denominations, all of them fighting with one another. Then do I have to worry that someone who died, you see, I'm a human being. I can't deal in absolutes. You know, there's been nothing in my life that allows me to do so. God does deal in absolutes because He is absolute. And so therefore, the application of justice, which is really what we're talking about, is what it comes down to. And I'll tell you, when it comes to atheism and God, it's not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of choice. Now, I really want you to hear that. It's not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of choice. And by putting it in that context, there is where free will comes in. Because when you find order, you find God. There's nothing chaotic about it. Even though you may see that there is chaos, and there is certainly a scientific principle of the chaos principle, but you will also find order behind that as well. But as I started to deep dive into, you heard me earlier mention the Big Bang Theory. I was surprised to find out where the Big Bang Theory came from. I'm not even going to give you the answer to it. I will ask you to research on your own the concepts of chemistry, the Big Bang Theory, the scientific method. When you find out, and that's just some of them, that's just scratching the surface. When you find out where those came from, let me know what you find out. Because I was dumbfounded. I was blown away. Wait a minute. I thought the whole idea that in my mind prior to science was opposed to religion. And lo and behold, it's not. Let me know what you find out on who and where the Big Bang Theory even came from. So, there is a principal opposition that I believe is God. Because God is the principal opposition to lawlessness, ruthlessness, and power. And without God, you can define life however you choose. And that is fundamentally how Satan thinks. So then the question always comes about, then why would God allow this evil to exist? The question is not that. The question is, which are you choosing? If you want to see evil in the world, I trust me, you can see all of it you want. Does that mean that God is like the puppet master behind pulling all of the strings? It doesn't. It doesn't. It certainly does fit that you can create anything you want and then turn around and blame God, or even become atheistic and deny His existence altogether. But I had also found some questions that I had to ask myself, and these questions were posed by God Himself. And so Job, right, he's struggling. He's really struggling. And Job gets asked some questions by God, and I would challenge any atheist to answer these questions. He says, "Who is this who darkens counsel with words of ignorance? Gird up your loins now like a man. I will question you, and you will tell me the answer." So that's God saying, I will question you, you tell me the answers. Where were you when I founded the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its size? Surely you know. Who stretched out the measuring line for it? Into what were its pedestals sunk, and who laid the cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Who shut within the doors the sea when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garments, and thick darkness its swaddling bands? So you see what he's asking. So if there is no God, then you tell me. If you have understanding, where were you when the earth was founded? Where were its pedestals sunk? Who laid the cornerstone? Tell me. You see, that question being posed to Job, it's the same question I had to pose to myself. That if there was nothing, then where, pray tell, did all of this come from? He goes on in Job, in chapter 40, and he says, "The Lord then answered Job and said, Will one who argues with the Almighty be corrected? Let him who would instruct God give answers." And then Job answered the Lord and said, "Look, I am of little account. What can I answer you? I put my hand over my mouth. I have spoken once, I will not reply twice, but I will do so no more." And then the Lord answered Job out of the storm and said, "Gird up your loins now like a man. I will question you, and you tell me the answers. Would you refuse to acknowledge my right? Would you condemn me that you may be justified?" Right there. Would you condemn me that you may be justified? This evil that exists in the world is not a creation of God's. No. It's from man. And when you come to understand that it is the heart of men that God stands ready to atone for and has atoned for already, that's where a relationship with God becomes life-changing. I cannot deny that there is evils in the world. I cannot deny that, yes, you can hold up the history that has been found in the Catholic Church of men who have done the very same thing that was done to me when I was a child. And I will tell you that that almost kept me from ever listening to the Catholic Church. Because as an abused child, when I saw that there were priests who were abusing children, that there were prelates who were covering for those men, I saw it as absolutely an abomination. But I also had to hold my heart and say, is that God? Is that man? And you see, every time I put my trust in man, man lets me down every time. Since I have started this relationship with God, God has never let me down. There's a complete system of order and morality behind faith in God. And there is a beautiful, beautiful structure underlying the reason that the church was given to us by Jesus anyway. And when you see that beauty, to be able to see just what the Catholic Church can do over the entire world. Now, yes, does it mean that if I have a pope with ill intentions, that the whole world will feel it? Absolutely. Which is why Satan would seek to attack any one of those. Any one of these men, bishops. Satan will attack them. Jesus told us that. But he also told us the gates of hell wouldn't prevail against it. So even though that she is in a very ugly state today, supernatural faith seems to have fallen by the wayside. So many times they want to change the Catholic Church to fit the world when the church wasn't here to conform to the world. The church was here to give the world a place to go. Oh, she is a beautiful church, and if the hearts of men will ever change to restore her to the beauty and the glory that she is, God will be made manifest again. I pray for that day. I pray for all the men that are in these positions of bishops, popes. I challenge you to do exactly what God has said. Gird up your loins and answer like a man. May God restore His church. May God restore the beauty of being universal to us once again. And if you're an atheist, I promise you this: you can find enough in your reasons not to believe that everything that you have that's objective. Just ask yourself, who would have put that in your heart in the first place? Who allowed that to come into your heart better? Satan never forces us to do anything. That is the saddest truth I can tell you. Satan doesn't force himself on us. God doesn't force himself on us. The question is, what do you choose? If you've chosen to follow Satan, I didn't understand it at first, but doing nothing is still serving Satan. He just doesn't have to fight that hard to earn you. But there is something that is so beautiful in a God that gives you enough free will that you can love Him back. If I die with nothing else, I am thankful for the beauty and the glory of finally being at peace and knowing that I do have somebody with whom I must be accountable. And that the idea that there is nothing was Satan inviting me into the realm of the dark pit of nothing anyway. I hope you find comfort in this message. And we'll speak to you again next week on John's Voice. Thank you.